The stench of industrial waste hit Gerald Davis first, followed by the unmistakable sound of panic in his coworkers' voices. There, in the recycling chamber of Proxima VII's mining facility, lay an ugly alien child, abandoned, deformed, and somehow still alive despite the toxic environment. The infant Tac-Tac's malformed exoskeleton jutted with irregular protrusions, 2 of its 6 limbs missing entirely, its compound eyes unsettlingly asymmetrical. "Someone get Hammond on the comm," shouted Riker, the shift supervisor, backing away from the waste disposal unit. "And don't touch that thing." Gerald, a 45-year-old mining engineer who'd seen his share of horrors in the 5 years since the Orion conflict ended, stepped closer instead of retreating. The widow's weathered face remained neutral while his colleagues grimaced in disgust. The infant's mandibles clicked weakly, its remaining 4 limbs twitching in what Gerald recognized as distress. "The Tac-Tac did this," mumbled Zhang from behind his filtration mask. "They dumped their defects, everyone knows that. We should contact their embassy," said Riker, already reaching for his communicator. "Let them handle their own garbage." Gerald's hand shot out, stopping Riker mid-motion. "You know what they'll do if we return it." The room fell silent. The fragile peace established after the devastating Orion conflict had revealed much about their insectoid neighbors, including their ruthless dedication to genetic perfection. The Tac-Tac eliminated imperfect offspring without hesitation or ceremony. The medical bay doors slid open with a hydraulic hiss, revealing Dr. Vera Nikolaev. The colony's xenobiologist moved with clinical precision, her stern features betraying nothing as she approached the disposal unit. At 39, Vera carried herself with the rigid posture of someone who'd learned to compartmentalize pain. The loss of her biological son 3 years ago had left her focused solely on Dr. Ork. "Dr. Nikolaev," Gerald acknowledged. "Can it survive?" Vera knelt beside the infant, scanning it with her medical device. The blue light passed over the malformed exoskeleton, displaying vital signs on her wrist unit. "Interesting," she said, her Russian accent thickening as she concentrated. "Internal systems appear functional despite the external deformities. By human standards, it's a viable life. By Tac-Tac standards." She didn't finish the sentence. Colony Administrator Hammond arrived, taking in the scene with a bureaucrat's doctor, ulating gaze. "Dr. Nikolaev, keep it alive until the Tac-Tac representatives arrive tomorrow morning. That's all." "Sir," Gerald started. "Returning it means—" "I know exactly what it means, Davis," Hammond cut him off. "And I also know what violating the Orion Peace Accords means for this colony. We're not risking interspecies conflict over one defective infant." Later that night, Vera sat alone in the medical bay, monitoring the infant's vital signs. The colony slept around her, but sleep had been a stranger to Vera since losing her son to Kapstev's disease. She watched the small creature with clinical detachment until it did something unexpected. The infant, despite its missing limbs and malformed body, attempted to groom itself. The deliberate movements mimicked the ritualistic cleaning practices adult Tac-Tac performed. Vera leaned closer, her scientific curiosity piqued. The level of cognitive awareness was remarkable for an infant supposedly deemed brain-damaged beyond salvation. Suddenly, the creature emitted a distinct clicking sound, a pattern Vera recognized from her xenobiology research. A Tac-Tac distress call, universal among their species, transcending their complex caste dialects. Dr. Omething cracked inside Dr. Vera Nikolaev. The maternal instinct she'd buried with her son flooded back with overwhelming force. She glanced at the clock. 8 hours until the Tac-Tac delegation arrived to collect the infant for certain death. Her hands steady but her heart racing, Vera disconnected the monitoring equipment and lifted the small creature. Against regulations, against explicit orders, against the fragile peace between humans and Tac-Tac, she made her decision. This ugly alien boy wasn't going back. Vera's fingers moved deftly over the keypad, disabling the medical bay's automated monitoring system. The night cycle's dim lighting cast long shadows across her face as she gathered supplies with practiced precision. The soft clicking sounds from the tac-tac infant drew her attention back to the examination table. "I know," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of life support equipment. "Just a little longer." She worked methodically, converting a standard thermal containment unit meant for biological samples into something that could sustain the infant. Her medical training proved invaluable as she installed miniature atmospheric regulators and calibrated them to the specific composition the tac-tac required. A small nutrient delivery system followed, along with biosensors to monitor the infant's vital functions. The infant watched her work with those asymmetrical compound eyes. Its remaining 4 limbs stretched toward her whenever she came close. Impossibly, despite its deformities, it displayed awareness beyond what should be possible for its developmental stage. "You understand what's happening, don't you?" Vera said, attaching the final component to the makeshift life support system. The blue indicator light blinked on, signaling operational status. The infant responded with a series of gentle clicks, not distress signals like before, but something softer almost. Contented, Vera found herself smiling for the first time in years. "Crick," she said, testing the name. "That's what I'll call you, for that sound you make when you're not afraid." Crick's mandibles moved in what Vera interpreted as recognition. She gently lifted the infant, noting how it instinctively curled its functioning limbs toward her body heat. With careful movements, she placed Crick into the modified containment unit. The infant settled, its exoskeleton catching the light in unusual patterns where the deformities created unexpected textures. Vera checked her watch. 5:45 hours. Hammond would arrive soon for the pre-delegation inspection. She secured the containment unit, now a functional incubator, inside her standard issue backpack. The pack bulged slightly, but not enough to draw immediate attention if she kept it partially concealed behind furniture or equipment. At precisely 600 hours, the medical bay doors slid open. Administrator Hammond entered, his face set in the grim expression of a man preparing for a unpleasant diplomatic encounter. "Dr. Nikolaev," he nodded curtly. "Is the specimen prepared for transfer to the tac-tac delegation?" Vera straightened, her face composed into the professional mask she'd perfected since losing her son. "There will be no transfer, Administrator." Hammond's eyes narrowed. "Explain." The infant expired at approximately 2:30 hours. Given the unknown nature of its deformities and potential for contamination, I followed standard biohazard protocols and processed the remains immediately. Vera gestured toward the disposal unit, its status light indicating recent use. In reality, she had processed several non-essential biological samples to create the electronic record. Hammond's shoulders visibly relaxed. "That simplifies matters considerably." He paced the length of the examination table where the infant had been. "Prepare a detailed medical report for the tac-tac delegates. Include all relevant data on the deformities and cause of death. Make it thorough enough to satisfy their inquiries without inviting further investigation." "Yes, Administrator," Vera replied, shifting slightly to keep her backpack from view. The medical bay doors opened again. Gerald Davis stood in the doorway, his miner's coveralls already showing smudges from early maintenance work. "Davis," Hammond frowned. "This is a restricted area until further notice." "Apologies, sir," Gerald said. "Maintenance requested a pressure check on the medical gas lines before the delegation arrives. Routine P. Dr. Akal." Hammond waved dismissively. "Fine. Dr. Nikolaev, I want that report within the hour. The tac-tac arrive at 800. He strode out, leaving Gerald and Vera alone. Gerald moved to a control panel, ostensibly checking the pressure gauges. His eyes flicked to Vera, then to her backpack with its unusual bulge. "The infant didn't die, did it?" he asked quietly. Vera's hand moved protectively toward her backpack. "I don't know what you mean, Davis. You've got the steadiest hands in the colony, Doctor, but your left eye twitches when you lie." Gerald stepped closer, lowering his voice further. "And something in your pack just moved." A soft, muffled clicking emanated from the backpack. Vera's composed expression fractured momentarily. "You know what the tac-tac do to their defective offspring," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I couldn't, you don't need to explain." Gerald glanced at the surveillance cameras. "But Hammond will have your career if he discovers this. And the tac-tac will demand much worse. I made my decision." Vera straightened, her Russian accent becoming more pronounced with emotion. "This infant is displaying cognitive development far beyond what should be possible given its physical state. Terminating it would be—" "I didn't say you made the wrong choice," Gerald interrupted, surprising her. "Just that you've made a dangerous one." At 7:55 hours, the colony's alert system announced the arrival of the tac-tac delegation. Vera sat in the main conference room, her backpack tucked beneath the table between her feet. She had positioned herself strategically near the exit, her tablet displaying the falsified medical report. The delegation entered with the characteristic clicking gait of their species. Chief Enforcer ZK-TVAC led the procession, his polished exoskeleton adorned with the insignia of high office. 3 warrior caste guards flanked him, their modified chitinous armor clearly designed for combat. The medical examiner followed, carrying advanced scanning equipment. Administrator Hammond rose to greet them with the formal tac-tac salutation. "Honored delegates, we welcome you to Proxima VII mining facility." Chief Enforcer ZK-TVAC's mandibles clicked rapidly. The translation device at his thorax converted the sounds to flat, mechanical English. "We come not as guests but as investigators. The abandonment of defective offspring is a serious violation of our biological protocols." "We understand the gravity of the situation," Hammond replied. "However, I regret to inform you the infant in question expired during the night. Dr. Nikolaev has prepared a comprehensive report." The tac-tac medical examiner stepped forward, antennae twitching. "Expired? At what time precisely?" "Approximately 2:30 hours, Vera answered, her voice steady despite the soft clicking she could hear from her backpack. ZK-TVAC's compound eyes fixed on Vera. "Convenient timing, Doctor. We require evidence of remains." As I explained to Administrator Hammond, the infant's deformities presented potential biohazard risks. Following standard protocol, I processed the remains immediately. Vera swiped through her tablet, displaying the falsified disposal records. "Unacceptable," the medical examiner chittered. "Our protocols require examination of remains regardless of condition. We will inspect your disposal facility and review all environmental data from the medical bay." Hammond's face paled slightly. "I assure you, all procedures were followed according to interspecies health regulations as outlined in the Orion Peace Accords." A soft, distinctive click emerged from beneath the table. Vera shifted in her chair, nudging her backpack with her foot to silence Crick. She noticed Gerald watching her from across the room, his expression unreadable. "We will conduct a thorough investigation," ZK-TVAC declared. "The environmental records, disposal logs, and medical bay must be examined for compliance." Vera felt sweat forming at her temples. The tac-tac medical examiner was already activating scanning equipment that would easily detect life signs if brought near her backpack. Crick clicked again, louder this time. Suddenly, alarm klaxons blared throughout the conference room. The environmental control panel on the wall flashed red as oxygen levels fluctuated dramatically. The tac-tac delegation reacted immediately, their sensitive respiratory structures struggling with the sudden pressure change. "What is happening?" Hammond demanded, turning to the nearest technician. Gerald stood by the environmental controls, his hand pulling back from the panel. "Sorry, sir. Must have triggered the emergency calibration sequence while checking those pressure irregularities I mentioned earlier. The TAC-TAC delegation chittered in discomfort, their organized formation breaking as they adjusted their breathing apparatus. In the confusion, Vera seized her opportunity. She grabbed her backpack and slipped out the conference room side exit, heart pounding against her ribs as she disappeared down the corridor. Vera slipped through the dimly lit service corridor, her backpack clutched tightly against her chest. The muffled clicking from inside confirmed Crick was still alert and responsive. She ducked into an alcove as a security patrol rushed past, then continued toward the rendezvous point Gerald had specified through a hastily whispered plan moments before triggering the environmental alarm. The maintenance access hatch appeared ahead, partially concealed behind a storage rack. Vera glanced over her shoulder, verified the corridor was empty, and tapped the entry code Gerald had given her. The panel beeped softly and the hatch slid open with a pneumatic hiss. Gerald waited inside, his face tight with tension. "They're already looking for you." Hammonds ordered a full security sweep. The TAC-TAC, mobilizing search parties. Gerald secured the hatch behind her. "We have minutes at most before they analyze the environmental logs and realize it was deliberate." Vera nodded, unzipping her backpack to check on Crick. The infant's compound eyes fixed on her, mandibles moving in what she now recognized as a greeting. "How are we getting off station?" Vera asked, carefully replacing the thermal containment unit's nutrient line. Gerald unfolded a maintenance schematic on his tablet. "Marcus Hall owes me a favor. He's arranged transport, but we need to reach the secondary docking bay without being detected." He traced a route through the maze of tunnels. These maintenance shafts don't appear on standard colony maps. Crick suddenly extended a limb toward the schematic, tapping insistently at a specific junction. Gerald stared. "Is it?" Suggesting a route. Vera watched as Crick traced a different path with startling precision. His cognitive functions are extraordinary. Maybe he recognizes something in the layout. Worth the risk, Gerald decided, committing the alternate route to memory before shutting down the tablet. "Let's move." The maintenance tunnels narrowed as they descended, forcing them to crawl through sections clogged with dust and abandoned equipment. The overhead lighting functioned sporadically, plunging them into darkness for stretches at a time. Gerald led the way, his knowledge of the mining facility's infrastructure guiding them through junction points and access ladders. "Careful here," Gerald whispered, helping Vera navigate past a cluster of pressure regulators. "Motion sensors on the next level. We'll need to move slowly." They proceeded at an agonizing pace, freezing at each distant sound that echoed through the metal passageways. Crick remained remarkably quiet, as if sensing the need for silence. After nearly an hour of careful navigation, they reached the designated meeting point, a small maintenance hub where 4 tunnels converged. Gerald raised his hand, signaling Vera to stop. "Something's wrong," he whispered, pointing to dark scorch marks scoring the floor plating. Vera knelt to examine the marks. "TAC-TAC weapons." Her fingers brushed a small puddle of tacky red liquid. "Blood." "Human blood." Gerald's expression hardened. They got to Marcus's contact first. He examined the surrounding area, noting the signs of struggle. The operative must have been captured. A faint chittering sound echoed from the tunnel behind them. Gerald tensed, recognizing the distinctive communication pattern of TAC-TAC search parties. "They've found our trail," he hissed, quickly surveying their options. "We need an alternative." Vera clutched the backpack tighter. "Where?" "The waste processing plant. It's our best shot at reaching an external access point." Gerald pointed to a narrow service duct. "This way." They crawled through the cramped duct, emerging into a deeper section of the maintenance system. The air grew thicker with industrial chemicals and processing agents. The walls dripped with condensation, and the distant thrumming of machinery vibrated through the floor. Crick began making distressed clicking sounds, the noise becoming more urgent with each passing minute. Vera stopped, alarmed by the intensity of the clicks. Something's wrong. She unzipped the backpack and lifted the thermal containment unit. Inside, Crick's movements had become erratic, his exoskeleton showing concerning discoloration patterns. "He can't breathe," Vera said, medical training taking over. "The unit's atmospheric regulation is failing and he's showing signs of exoskeletal stress. I need to get him out." "In this air." Gerald glanced around the tunnel worriedly. "The processing effluent contains trace elements toxic to tac physiology. I don't have a choice. He'll die in the unit." Gerald paused, then removed his environmental filter mask. "Use this." He began disassembling the device, manipulating the components with practiced hands. "I can modify it into a breathing apparatus." Vera carefully extracted Crick from the containment unit. The infant's clicking grew weaker as it struggled to process the tunnel atmosphere. She cradled the small body while Gerald worked, attaching components to create a makeshift respiratory aid. "Hold him still," Gerald instructed, fitting the adapted mask over Crick's primary breathing passages. The infant squirmed, then gradually relaxed as filtered air flowed through the device. "It's working," Vera confirmed, monitoring Crick's respiration. Gerald nodded, but a harsh cough suddenly racked his body. Without his mask, the tunnel's industrial contaminants assaulted his unprotected lungs. He covered his mouth, trying to muffle the sound. "You need protection too," Vera said, reaching for her medical kit. Gerald waved her off, suppressing another cough. "No time. The search parties will have heard that. We need to keep moving." They pressed onward, Gerald leading them through increasingly narrow passages. His coughing grew more frequent, each spasm threatening to reveal their position. Vera created a temporary filter from medical supplies, but it provided minimal protection. They finally reached the observation port overlooking the waste processing plant. Gerald's face fell as he peered through the reinforced glass. "Tac control," he whispered, pointing to the armed guards positioned at each exit. Through the port, they observed Administrator Hammond seated in the center of the room, his face pale with fear. Chief Enforcer ZK Tvac loomed over him, chitinous armor gleaming under the harsh industrial lighting. "Where have they gone?" ZK Tvac demanded, the translation device rendering his clicks into flat English. "Your deception carries severe penalties under DRE Accords." Hammond's voice wavered. "I had no knowledge of Dr. Nikolaev's actions, but the maintenance worker, Davis, triggered the environmental alert. They must be working together." ZK Tvac's mandibles clicked rapidly. "This is now classified as a Class 1 biological contraband incident." He activated a communication device. "I am invoking emergency powers under Section 47 of the Orion Peace Accords. Request immediate deployment of containment forces from Outpost Zek 12. Gerald pulled back from the port. "They're calling for military backup. We've lost our primary exit." Vera adjusted Crick's breathing apparatus, her mind racing. "What options do we have left?" Gerald's expression shifted as a memory surfaced. "The evacuation pods." He wiped sweat from his forehead, fighting back another cough. From before the colony expansion, they installed a backup escape system during initial construction. It was decommissioned after the meteorite impact 3 years ago. "The decompression zone, that area's been sealed off." "Exactly. The TAC won't expect us to go there." Gerald traced a new route on the wall condensation. "We can reach it through the old cooling system, but it means crossing an unshielded section exposed to surface radiation." Vera glanced down at Crick, who had fallen into an exhausted sleep against her chest. "It's our only choice." They backtracked through the tunnels, moving as quickly as Gerald's deteriorating condition allowed. His coughing fits grew more violent, leaving him gasping for breath after each episode. During a brief rest period, Vera used her medical supplies to create a rudimentary treatment for chemical exposure. "This will help temporarily," she explained, injecting the solution into his arm. "But you need proper medical treatment." Gerald nodded weakly. Just need to last until we reach the pods. As Vera worked, Crick stirred against her chest. The infant reached toward Gerald with a tentative limb touching the man's hand. To their surprise, Crick removed the breathing apparatus and offered it to Gerald. "What is he doing?" Gerald asked, bewildered. Vera watched in fascination. "He's trying to help you. This contradicts everything we know about tac development. Their young only form attachments to genetically optimal caregivers." Crick chittered softly, pushing the device toward Gerald again. Gerald gently guided it back to the infant's respiratory openings. "Keep it, little guy. I'll manage." He smiled through another cough. Remarkable adaptation instinct. They continued through narrowing passages until reaching a heavy security door marked with radiation warnings. Gerald accessed the control panel, frowning at the corroded circuits. "Years of neglect," he muttered, studying the damaged systems. "The automatic controls are fried." He pulled components from their communication devices, splicing wires and bypassing burned-out circuits. "This disables our ability to call for help, but it should work." The airlock groaned, ancient mechanisms fighting years of disuse. The door slowly slid open, revealing the devastation beyond. Emergency lighting cast an eerie red glow across twisted metal and debris floating in the zero-gravity environment. Vera removed emergency environmental suits from her medical kit. "Standard procedure for xenobiologists," she explained, noting Gerald's surprised expression. "Always prepare for rapid evacuation scenarios." They donned the protective gear, Vera creating a specialized pouch for Crick against her chest, connecting his breathing apparatus to her suit's oxygen supply. The infant remained unnaturally still, as if understanding the gravity of their situation. "Ready?" Gerald asked, his voice muffled through the helmet. Vera nodded and they stepped into the decompression zone. The destruction was worse than anticipated. The meteorite impact had shredded the section, leaving structural supports exposed like broken bones. Frozen corpses drifted in the vacuum, their expressions fixed in eternal terror. Equipment floated aimlessly, seized in the moment of catastrophe. They navigated the zero-gravity environment carefully, using handholds and tether lines to avoid drifting into the debris field. Gerald led them through the wreckage, following emergency indicators toward the evacuation pod bay. When they finally reached the bay, disappointment crashed over them. Most of the pods had been stripped for parts or crushed by the impact. Only a single unit remained intact, its systems dark and dormant. "Can you get it working?" Vera asked, watching Gerald examine the pod's exterior. "Maybe." He opened the access panel, studying the internal components. "Life support is designed for one person, though. We'll need modifications to accommodate all three of us." As Gerald worked on the pod systems, a sudden transmission crackled through their helmet speakers. Vera jumped, adjusting her communications receiver. "Repeat, this is Lockthei contacting human fugitives. Please acknowledge if you receive this transmission." Gerald and Vera exchanged alarmed glances. "It's coming through on the emergency frequency," Gerald said. "Shoot, Doctor, be secure." Vera hesitated, then activated her transmitter. "This is Dr. Vera Nikolaev, who is Lockthei." The response came immediately, the clicks and chirps of tac speech translated through a device similar to those used by the delegation. "I am Crick's biological parent. I left him at your facility deliberately. He is not defective, he is our future. He is not defective, he is our future." The transmission cut off abruptly as a violent shudder ran through the decompression zone. Gerald's head snapped up from the pod's control panel. "They've found us. We need to move now." Through the jagged opening that had once been a viewport, Vera spotted the telltale lights of tac search drones sweeping methodically through the debris field. "Is the pod operational?" she asked, shielding Crick's small form as another tremor shook the structure around them. Gerald connected the final set of wires and the pod systems flickered to life. "Barely. Life support's at minimal capacity, navigation's unreliable and the communication system. He gestured at the cobbled-together array of components. It's functional but fragile. We don't have a choice, Vera said, watching the searchlights draw closer. Gerald nodded grimly. Get in. The evacuation pod was designed for a single occupant, a cramped emergency measure of last resort. Gerald helped Vera inside first, then carefully passed Crick to her before squeezing his own frame into the remaining space. Their bodies pressed uncomfortably against each other as Gerald sealed the hatch. Lockthei transmitted coordinates, Gerald said, punching the data into the navigation console. I don't know where they lead, but it's our only option. The pod's launch sequence initiated with a series of warning alarms. Outside, the first of the TAC-TAC search drones had reached the bay entrance. They've spotted us, Vera said, clutching Crick tightly. With a violent lurch, the pod ejected from its dock. The sudden acceleration pressed them hard against the rear bulkhead. Through the small viewport, they watched the decompression zone recede rapidly, the colony's exterior lights shrinking to pinpricks against the dark backdrop of space. A proximity alert sounded. Gerald checked the sensor display. TAC-TAC patrol vessel closing fast. They must have been waiting outside the colony. The pod shuddered as energy waves washed over its hull. Tractor beam, Gerald explained, his fingers flying across the controls. They're trying to capture us. He diverted power from non-essential systems, pushing the pod's engines beyond safe parameters. The small craft bucked and vibrated as it strained against the tractor beam's pull. The radiation field, Vera suggested, pointing to the sensor readings. If we can reach that band of solar particles, it might disrupt their beam. Gerald adjusted their trajectory, aiming for the concentrated band of radiation. The pod's hull groaned under the strain as they accelerated directly toward the hazardous region. Hold on, Gerald warned. The moment they entered the radiation field, the tractor beam flickered and dispersed. The sudden release sent their pod tumbling in an uncontrolled spin. Gerald fought with the controls, eventually stabilizing their flight path. That bought us time, but they're still following, he said, eyeing the sensor display. Staying just outside the radiation field, maintaining tracking distance. A harsh cough racked Gerald's body, worse than before. Blood flecked his lips as he struggled to catch his breath. The chemical exposure from the maintenance tunnels, combined with the pod's thinning air, was taking its toll. Oxygen levels are dropping, Vera noted, checking the environmental readings. The life support wasn't designed for 3. Gerald nodded weakly. I had to compromise, rerouted power from life support to propulsion. Vera reached for her medical kit, extracting a respirator mask and a vial of clear fluid. This will help your lungs process oxygen more efficiently. She administered the injection, then fitted the mask over his face. Breathe slowly. The pod's warning system activated again, alerting them to critically low oxygen reserves. Crick stirred in Vera's arms, his chitin plates shifting color from their normal iridescent blue to a dull gray, a sign of distress. He's struggling to breathe too, Vera said, dividing her attention between her 2 patients. She adjusted Crick's breathing apparatus, allocating the last of her specialized atmospheric supplements to the infant. Gerald's condition deteriorated rapidly over the next few hours. His breathing became shallow and labored, each breath an obvious struggle. Vera monitored both him and Crick closely, rationing her dwindling medical supplies between them. She ignored her own growing symptoms, the headache and dizziness that signaled oxygen deprivation. We're approaching the coordinates, Gerald announced, his voice barely audible through the mask. His fingers trembled as he checked the navigation display. But there's nothing there. Vera leaned forward, scanning the viewport and sensor readings. Empty space greeted them, no ship, no station, no celestial body at the designated rendezvous point. Could the coordinates be wrong? She asked. Gerald shook his head. Triple-checked. This is exactly where Lockthei directed us. He attempted to activate the communication array. Maybe they're cloaked or hidden somehow. The cobbled-together communication system emitted only crackling static when Gerald tried broadcasting their arrival. He adjusted frequencies repeatedly, searching for any response. "Oxygen reserves at 15 minutes, the pod's computer announced dispassionately. The tac-tac vessel had closed half the distance, moving cautiously but purposefully toward their position. "They know we're running out of options," Gerald said. Another coughing fit seized him, more violent than before. When it subsided, he slumped forward against the control panel, unconscious. "Gerald!" Vera reached for him, checking his pulse. It was present but weak and irregular. Crick squirmed in her grasp, reaching toward Gerald's still form. The infant slipped from her protective embrace and crawled across the pod's interior to Gerald's side. Vera watched in astonishment as Crick placed his malformed limbs against Gerald's chest in what appeared to be a deliberate pattern. "What are you doing?" she whispered. She recognized the positioning from ancient tac-tac medical texts she'd studied during her xenobiological research, a healing posture documented in artifacts thousands of years old, but dismissed by modern tac-tac science as primitive superstition. A sudden proximity alert blared through the pod, startling Vera. She spun toward the viewport, expecting to see the tac-tac patrol ship closing in for capture. Instead, a massive vessel materialized directly ahead of them, seemingly appearing from nowhere. Unlike any ship Vera had ever encountered, it incorporated elements of both human and tac-tac design, yet was distinctly neither. No official markings identified its origin or allegiance. A beam of energy, more focused and refined than standard tractor technology, locked onto their pod. Unlike the harsh pull of the patrol ship's beam, this one enveloped them in a stable field that halted their momentum without the violent shuddering they'd experienced earlier. The pursuing tac-tac vessel fired a series of warning shots that dissipated harmlessly against the mysterious ship's shields. A mechanized voice transmitted on all frequencies. "Surrender the pod and its occupants immediately under authority of the Biological Purity Enforcement Division." The mysterious vessel responded by deploying a swarm of autonomous drones. The small devices surrounded the tac-tac ship, emitting pulses of electromagnetic energy targeted at specific systems. Within seconds, the patrol vessel's weapons went dark, and its engines flared erratically before shutting down completely. Vera watched in amazement as their pod was drawn steadily toward the unknown ship. A specialized docking bay opened to receive them, its design accommodating their small craft perfectly. The moment they crossed the threshold, the mysterious vessel accelerated away from the disabled tac-tac patrol ship, leaving it drifting impotently in space. The docking bay pressurized rapidly. Through the pod's viewport, Vera observed a diverse team rushing toward them, humans working alongside what appeared to be tac-tac individuals, though the latter displayed physical variations similar to Crick's. Instead of being hindered by these deformities, they moved with purpose and efficiency, their modified limbs and sensory organs seeming to enhance rather than impair their abilities. The pod's hatch opened from the outside. Vera gathered Crick in her arms and emerged first, blinking in the bright light of the docking bay. Two humans approached her, a tall man with a distinctive scar across his jawline and a woe doctor, wearing a white medical coat with a familiar pendant hanging from her neck. "Dr. Nikolaev," the man said, "I'm Marcus Hall. We need to move quickly." Vera recognized the name, the underground network operator Dr. Rauld had mentioned, whose operative had been captured. The woman stepped forward. "I'm Dr. Eliza Davis. How is Gerald?" The pendant around her neck caught Vera's attention, identical to one she'd seen in pictures of Gerald's late wife. "He needs immediate medical attention," Vera replied, her voice hoarse from oxygen deprivation. Chemical exposure to his lungs, followed by radiation. He lost consciousness several minutes ago. The team rushed to extract Gerald from the pod, transferring him to a hovering medical platform. Eliza moved alongside him, monitoring his vital signs as they hurried from the docking bay. Marcus guided Vera through gleaming corridors, supporting her as fatigue threatened to overcome her. "The medical bay is equipped for both species," he explained. "Gerald will receive the best possible care." They entered a sophisticated facility unlike any Vera had seen, a seamless integration of human and modified tac medical technology. Two separate teams worked in coordinated precision, one focusing on Gerald, the other preparing a station for Crick. A tac figure stepped forward from the doorway, distinguishable from the others by elaborate markings on her exoskeleton. Crick immediately chittered excitedly, reaching toward her with all his limbs. "Lochthei," Vera murmured, recognizing the voice from the transmission. Lochthei approached, performing an intricate greeting ritual with Crick that confirmed their biological connection. The infant responded with perfectly matched movements, a synchronized dance of limbs and antennae that left no doubt of their relationship. "Thank you for protecting my child," Lochthei said, her translated voice filled with emotion. "You risked everything for one you were taught to fear." "He needed help," Vera replied simply. "Where are we going?" "To Sanctuary," Lochthei explained. A hidden outpost on an uncharted moon in the Proxima Centauri system's Uit cloud. There, humans and tac evolutionary variants lived together, beyond the reach of both governments. The ship lurched suddenly as it accelerated to FTL speeds. Marcus steadied Vera, leading her to a treatment bed where a medical technician began addressing her radiation exposure. "The situation at Proxima VII has escalated," Marcus informed her, his expression grave. "The tac government has officially declared a biological contraband incident. They've invoked emergency provisions of the Orion Peace Accord's military action is authorized to contain biological threats. 3 enforcement vessels are already at the colony, and human residents are being subjected to invasive searches and interrogations." "Earth's response?" Vera asked, wincing as the technician administered a radiation counteragent. "The Security Council is divided. Some members view this as a clear treaty violation, others fear provoking the tac further." Marcus sighed. Politics while lives hang in the balance. Across the medical bay, Gerald stirred on his treatment platform. Eliza bent over him, her relief visible as his eyes opened. Their reunion was brief, but emotional words exchanged in hushed tones as recognition dawned in Gerald's eyes. The moment was interrupted by alarm klaxons blaring throughout the ship. Marcus's communication device activated automatically. "Hall," he answered, his expression darkening as he listened to the report. "Understood, we're on our way." He turned to Vera. "Can you walk?" She nodded, pushing herself upright despite the technician's protests. "What's happening?" she asked. "Something impossible," Marcus replied, leading her toward the bridge. A tac military carrier just emerged from FTL directly in our path, a prototype vessel that shouldn't exist according to our intelligence. They entered the bridge to find a scene of controlled chaos. At the center stood a tac variant with an unusual cranial formation, an additional sensory organ that extended from the top of her head, swiveling in-depth doctor, and lied to track multiple displays simultaneously. "Captain Vixton," Marcus introduced. "This is Dr. Vera Nikolaev." The captain acknowledged Vera with a quick gesture, her attention primarily on the tactical display. The screen showed a massive tac vessel deploying smaller craft in a precise pattern designed to cut off all potential escape vectors. Pursuit craft specifically designed for biological contraband interception, Vixton explained, her translator rendering her clicks into crisp, efficient speech. "We cannot outrun them." "Options?" Marcus asked. "We must divert to contingency point Beta," Vixton replied. "It will delay our arrival at Sanctuary by several days and take us through the Proxima radiation belt." "The radiation belt," Vera interjected. We've all been exposed already. Another dose could be fatal, especially for Crick. A commotion at the entrance to the bridge drew their attention. Lockthei entered, carrying Crick. The infant appeared agitated, chittering and reaching toward the navigational controls. "He wants access to the system," Lockthei said. "This is a secure bridge during emergency operations." One of the human officers objected. Lockthei moved forward regardless. "Please, trust what you've seen of him so far." Captain Vixton nodded her authorization after a moment's consideration. Lockthei placed Crick before the navigation interface. The infant immediately pressed his limbs against the control surface, establishing what appeared to be a direct neural connection. The display flickered, star charts rapidly cycling through the projection field until settling on a detailed map of the radiation belt. A narrow corridor appeared, a path through the radiation that didn't exist on any standard chart. The route twisted through the densest part of the belt, following what appeared to be natural gaps in the radiation pattern too subtle for conventional sensors to detect. "Impossible," whispered the navigation officer. "Our best astrophysicists couldn't map a path that precise." Lockthei's posture conveyed pride. "This confirms my research. These defective offspring possess neural structures capable of processing astronomical data at levels beyond our most advanced scientists." Vixton studied the projection, her additional sensory organ focused intently on the displayed path. "Implement this course immediately," she ordered. The ship banked sharply, accelerating toward the heart of the radiation belt. On the tactical display, the pursuing vessels hesitated at the belt's perimeter, clearly detecting radiation levels far beyond safety parameters. "They won't follow immediately," Marcus observed. "But they won't abandon the pursuit either." As they penetrated deeper into the radiation belt, the ship's systems began to show signs of strain. Warning indicators flashed across multiple stations as radiation levels inside the vessel gradually rose. "Shields at 60% and dropping," reported a TAC engineer. "Life support compensating but showing degradation in filtration efficiency." Vera moved to Lockthei's side, examining Crick with professional concern. "His exoskeleton is absorbing too much radiation. He needs protection beyond what we can provide here." From the doorway, a weak voice interrupted. "I might have a solution." Gerald stood there, supported by Eliza, his face pale but determined. "I might have a solution," Gerald repeated, his voice stronger as he pushed away from Eliza's support. He shuffled toward the navigation console where Crick remained connected to the system. "The radiation adaptations in my prosthetics, we can modify them to create temporary shielding for Crick." Captain Vixton swiveled her sensory organ toward him. "Elaborate." Gerald leaned against the console, breathing heavily. "The composite materials in my limb replacements were designed to withstand extreme mining conditions, including radiation exposure. If a blinding flash erupted from the viewport, cutting him off mid-sentence." The radiation belt before them parted like a curtain, revealing a massive structure floating in the void, a sprawling space station constructed of interconnected modules that blended human and TAC architectural styles. "What is that?" Vera whispered, moving closer to the viewport. The communication system activated automatically. A calm, gender-neutral voice spoke. "Vessel in distress, this is Nexus Sanctuary. We have detected critical radiation exposure and systems failure. Proceed to Docking Bay 7 for emergency assistance." Marcus and Vixton exchanged bewildered glances. "Sanctuary," Marcus murmured. "But we're nowhere near. Our navigational data confirms this isn't our intended destination," the TAC navigator reported, antennae twitching in confusion. Lockthei looked down at Crick, who had disconnected from the navigation system and was now chittering excitedly. "I believe my child has found us help." Captain Vixton assessed the tactical situation quickly. With shields failing and radiation levels rising inside the vessel, they had little choice. "Proceed to docking bay 7, she ordered. "Maintain alert status." The ship glided toward the station, guidance beams locking onto their hull and drawing them into a massive docking structure. As they approached, Vera observed the bay entrance reconfiguring itself, panels sliding and readjusting to precisely accommodate their vessel's dimensions. "The docking mechanism is adapting to our ship's specifications," Gerald noted, his engineer's mind momentarily overriding his physical discomfort. Their vessel settled into the docking cradle with a gentle shudder. The external radiation readings dropped immediately as the bay shields engaged, sealing them in a protective envelope. "Atmosphere and pressure normalized," reported the environmental officer. "External readings indicate compatible conditions for both human and tac physiology." Captain Vixton organized a boarding party herself, Marcus, Gerald, Eliza, Vera, and Lochthei carrying Crick. They approached the airlock with weapons ready, uncertain what awaited them. The airlock cycled open to reveal a spotless entry chamber with an unusual feature: dual pathways leading from the central door, one configured for human proportions, the other for tac anatomy. "The station recognized our mixed crew," Marcus observed as they moved cautiously through the airlock. They emerged into a vast atrium where gravity, temperature, and atmospheric composition created a perfect median environment comfortable for both species, without requiring either to use supplemental systems. Vera supported Gerald, who stumbled slightly as they entered. His breathing remained labored from the chemical damage to his lungs. She noted the pallor of his skin and the radiation burns beginning to form on his exposed flesh. A group of sleek, hovering drones approached the party. They emitted no sound as they surrounded the radiation-affected crew members, bathing them in pulsating blue light. "Medical scanners," Eliza identified, her own medical training recognizing the diagnostic patterns. "Advanced models." One drone positioned itself directly before Gerald. A holographic interface materialized, displaying his internal injuries with remarkable clarity. The device extended a slender appendage that delivered a fine mist directly into his respiratory tract. Gerald inhaled reflexively, then doubled over coughing. When he straightened, his eyes widened in surprise. "I can breathe," he said, drawing a deep breath without pain for the first time since their escape. "The inflammation is subsiding." Similar drones attended to Vera, administering targeted treatments that eliminated the early signs of radiation poisoning within minutes. She watched in astonishment as the reddened patches on her skin faded before her eyes. The most sophisticated drone approached Lochthei and Crick. It projected a complex three-dimensional grid over the infant, highlighting the malformations in its exoskeleton that tac society had deemed impure. The drone emitted a series of precise energy pulses that strengthened the weakened areas without altering their configuration. Crick chittered happily, reaching toward the drone with newfound strength in his previously underdeveloped limbs. "The treatment is preserving his neural structure while reinforcing his physical form," Lochthei noted with obvious relief. Movement at the far end of the atrium drew their attention. A group of individuals approached a mixed party of humans and tac walking together with the easy familiarity of long association. At their head walked an elderly human male, his posture military straight despite his age. His weathered face bore the marks of old battle scars, but his eyes remained sharp and alert. Beside him moved a female tac with an unusual six-limbed configuration and asymmetrical carapace. "Welcome to Nexus Sanctuary," the man announced as they reached the newcomers. "I am Commander Thaddeus Wallace. This is Senior Geneticist Zikra. I see our medical drones have already begun treatment." Marcus stepped forward, lowering his weapon but maintaining a cautious stance. "How did you find us?" Wallace smiled. We've been monitoring unusual activity in this sector following reports of a TAC-TAC variant being smuggled from Proxima VII. When your vessel entered the radiation belt using that remarkable navigation pattern, our sensors detected you immediately. Zikra moved closer to Lochthei and Crick, her antennae performing an elaborate greeting ritual. The infant's neural emissions registered on our long-range scanners, she explained, her translator rendering her clicks with unusual clarity. Such patterns are distinctive to advanced variants like myself. Vera noted the TAC-TAC scientist's asymmetrical exoskeleton, a configuration that would have marked her for elimination in mainstream TAC-TAC society. Yet she moved with confidence and authority, her 6 limbs functioning in perfect coordination. This station, Vera began, looking around at the seamless integration of human and TAC-TAC design elements. What is this place? Commander Wallace gestured for them to follow. A story best told as we walk. Your vessel requires repairs, and you could all use proper rest after your ordeal. As they moved through the station's corridors, Wallace explained. Nexus Sanctuary was established 50 years ago, before the Orion conflict. A coalition of scientists from both our species recognized the coming tensions and created this place as a neutral ground where cooperation could continue regardless of political developments. They entered a vast central hub where humans and TAC-TAC worked side by side at integrated control stations. Overhead, a transparent dome revealed the swirling colors of the radiation belt outside, somehow rendered harmless by the station's shielding technology. We exist in a spatial anomaly, Wallace continued. It disrupts standard detection methods, making us invisible to conventional sensors. We've been monitoring both civilizations, rescuing those who share our vision of cooperation, particularly TAC-TAC variants targeted by purity protocols. Gerald stopped abruptly, his attention caught by a technical schematic displayed on a nearby workstation. These designs, he murmured, approaching the display. I recognize the underlying principles. Eliza joined him, her hand moving to the pendant around her neck. The prosthetic integration system, she confirmed. It's based on Monica's Reset Dr. H. Wallace nodded solemnly. Your wife's work formed the foundation of many of our adaptive technologies, Dr. Reeves. Her brother shared her research with our original coalition before her death. Gerald traced the schematic with trembling fingers. She always believed her work could bridge gaps between species, he said quietly. Not just replace missing limbs, but create new connections. While Gerald processed this revelation, Zikra led Lochthei and Crick to a specialized examination area. Advanced diagnostic equipment confirmed what Lochthei had theorized. Crick's neural structure represented not a defect but an evolutionary advancement. These pathways, Zikra indicated on a 3-dimensional neural map, enable processing capabilities far beyond standard TAC-TAC cognition. Your research was correct, Lochthei. What our government labels as impurity is actually our species' next evolutionary step. Lochthei's posture conveyed vindication mixed with sorrow. They've been systematically eliminating our future. Historical records confirm similar variants appeared throughout our history, Zikra added. But increased enforcement of purity laws in recent centuries has nearly eradicated these genetic lines. Vera followed a young human technician to the station's integrated nursery, where TAC-TAC variants and human children played together in a carefully designed environment. She observed with professional interest how the species complemented each other developmentally, human children teaching social adaptability through imaginative play, while young TAC-TAC provided structured problem-solving approaches that accelerated human cognitive development. A small TAC-TAC variant with unusually developed sensory organs approached her, offering a complex puzzle cube. When Vera hesitated with the unfamiliar object, the child positioned her fingers correctly and chittered encouragingly. They help each other overcome species-specific limitations, explained the nursery supervisor who had joined her. The results have been remarkable. Both species develop capabilities beyond what they achieve in single-species environments. Meanwhile, Marcus joined Commander Wallace in a secure briefing room where tactical displays showed the escalating situation at Proxima VII. Multiple TAC enforcement vessels surrounded the colony, conducting invasive searches of human habitations and businesses. The TAC government has implemented stricter biological purity enforcement throughout their territories, Wallace explained, manipulating the display to show military movements along the border regions. Human colonies have increased military readiness in response. Both sides prepare for potential conflict, with diplomatic channels deteriorating as hardliners gain influence. The old patterns repeating, Marcus observed grimly. Perhaps not, Wallace replied. Your arrival with Crick presents an opportunity. The Station Council has proposed using our scientific evidence about TAC evolution and the benefits of human TAC cooperation to challenge the biological purity doctrine driving this conflict. You want to go public? Marcus asked, surprise evident in his voice. We need to convince representatives from both governments to visit the station, Wallace confirmed. See our work firsthand. It's risky, it could compromise our sanctuary if handled incorrectly. Their discussion was interrupted by an urgent signal. A communications officer entered, her expression tense. Commander, we've detected an unauthorized transmission from Maintenance Section 12, she reported. Security has detained the source Jorven Reed, the technician we rescued from the mining colony last month. Wallace's expression hardened. What was transmitted? Our coordinates, sir. The signal was brief but contained enough data to locate us. Preliminary interrogation indicates Reed is an operative for a human supremacist faction, hoping to acquire our technology for military advantage against the TAC. Before Wallace could respond, another alert sounded. The tactical display automatically updated, showing multiple vessels entering the Anomaly 3 TAC enforcement cruisers and 2 human military frigates, all heavily armed and on converging trajectories toward the station. How long? Wallace asked, his voice calm despite the gravity of the situation. 3 hours until the first vessels arrive, the officer replied. Less than 6 hours until all forces converge on our position. Wallace activated the station-wide communication system. All personnel, this is Commander Wallace. Implement Security Protocol Omega. This is not a drill. All non-essential personnel report to evacuation staging areas. Section leaders initiate defense preparations. He turned to Marcus. Find your companions. We need to convene the council immediately. As alarms echoed through the station, Vera reunited with Gerald and Eliza in the engineering section where they had been examining the station's integrated systems. The look on Marcus's face told them everything they needed to know. How bad? Gerald asked. Catastrophic, Marcus replied. We've been compromised. Military forces from both sides will reach us within hours. Gerald's expression hardened with determination. Then we need to work quickly. I think I've found something in these systems that might give us a chance. Gerald said, his fingers flying across the integrated command console. The station's primary systems were designed with a distributed intelligence framework similar to Monica's neural interface prototypes. What does that mean for us? Marcus asked, peering over Gerald's shoulder at the scrolling data. It means, Gerald explained, that instead of evacuating, we could potentially hide the station itself. Eliza stepped closer. A facility this size can't simply disappear. Not physically, Gerald agreed. But we can manipulate how it appears to external sensors. He pulled up a schematic of the radiation belt surrounding them. The same anomaly that keeps this station hidden could be amplified to create a sensory blind spot, essentially making the station appear as nothing more than background radiation. Commander Wallace studied the proposal with narrowed eyes. The power requirements would be enormous. Yes, Gerald acknowledged, but if we redirect energy from non-essential systems and utilize the emergency power reserves, we can maintain the effect long enough to initiate negotiations. Zikra chittered thoughtfully, her 6 limbs working multiple consoles simultaneously. The theory is sound. I can calibrate our shield emitters to generate the appropriate interference pattern. Wallace made his decision. Do it. I'll convene the council to discuss our diplomatic options. He turned to Marcus. Your arrival with evidence of genetic enhancement benefits might be exactly what we need to prevent this confrontation from escalating into open warfare. While the station prepared for the approaching military forces, Vera found herself in the nursery once more. The children, both human and tac-tac, continued their activities, unaware of the danger approaching. She watched as a young tac-tac variant with an unusual cranial structure helped a human child assemble a complex 3-dimensional puzzle. They represent everything that could be lost, said a voice behind her. Vera turned to find Lochthei watching the scene with the tac-tac equivalent of sorrowful tenacity. They will not be lost, Vera asserted, her medical training making her practical rather than sentimental. Even if this sanctuary falls, what it represents, what it has proven, cannot be undone. These children have already changed everyone who's interacted with them. Lochthei's antennae twitched in agreement. My people's obsession with biological purity has cost us generations of potential advancement. Crick is living proof of what we've been discarding. In the engineering section, Gerald worked alongside Zikra to reconfigure the station's shield emitters. The integrated design principles reminded him painfully of Monica's work. The seamless interface between biological systems and mechanical components had been her life's pursuit. Your wife's research formed the foundation for much of our adaptive technology, Zikra noted, observing his expression. Her theories on neuroplasticity and mechanical interface were decades ahead of mainstream science. Gerald nodded, not trusting himself to speak. Instead, he focused on the calibration sequence, making minute adjustments to the emitter array. The station's defensive preparations continued as the approaching vessels drew nearer. In the command center, Wallace and Marcus reviewed tactical options with senior staff members. The human vessels are Alliance Navy frigates Valiant class, Wallace explained, highlighting their positions on the tactical display. Currently under the command of Admiral Hall, a moderate who might be receptive to dialogue if approached correctly. And the tac-tac vessels? Marcus asked. Enforcement cruisers from the Central Authority, Wallace replied. Less predictable, they operate under direct control of the Biological Purity Division. A communications specialist interrupted with an urgent report. Commander, we're receiving a transmission from the lead human vessel. Admiral Hall is requesting direct communication with station leadership. Wallace exchanged glances with Marcus. This might be our opening. Put it through to my private channel. I want to assess Hall's position before making our move. While Wallace engaged with Admiral Hall, Gerald completed the final adjustments to the shield configuration. He activated the system, and the station's ambient lighting dimmed as power redirected to the emitter array. Radiation pattern established, Zikra confirmed. External sensors will detect only standard anomaly readings consistent with the radiation belt's natural properties. Gerald monitored the energy consumption with concern. We're drawing more power than projected. At current usage rates, we can maintain this configuration for approximately 18 hours before emergency reserves are depleted. It will have to be enough, Zikra responded. In the council chamber, Wallace gathered the station's leadership along with the newcomers. His conversation with Admiral Hall had yielded unexpected results. Admiral Hall claims she's here to warn us, Wallace explained to the assembled group. According to her intelligence, The TAC vessels are under orders to locate and eliminate a biological contaminant, believed to be harbored at these coordinates. Crick, Lockthei stated flatly. Apparently, Wallace continued, the infant's neural patterns triggered automated security protocols when your ship passed through TAC territory. The Biological Purity Division has been tracking variants with similar neural configurations for months. Marcus frowned. How did they know to look for these specific patterns? That's the concerning part, Wallace said. Admiral Hall believes the TAC have captured other variants showing similar advanced neural development. They've been studying these individuals to improve their detection systems. Vera felt a chill. They're experimenting on their own people to better identify those they consider impure. Admiral Hall has offered her protection, Wallace continued. She proposes evacuating essential personnel and research data to her vessels before the TAC cruisers arrive. Can she be trusted? Gerald asked. Her record suggests she's a pragmatist who recognizes the potential benefits of human TAC cooperation, Wallace replied. More importantly, she's provided access codes to verify her identity and authorization. The Council debated the offer while monitoring the approaching vessels. The TAC cruisers had accelerated, clearly intent on reaching the station before the human frigates. We need more than evacuation, Gerald stated. We need to present irrefutable evidence that TAC variants represent evolutionary advancement, not contamination. Precisely what evidence would convince generations of ingrained biological prejudice? Asked one of the human scientists. Lockthei straightened, her posture conveying certainty. Crick's neural development has already exceeded our projections. If we could demonstrate the practical advantages of these adaptations, show how they benefit both our species, it might create enough doubt to pause the enforcement protocols. We need a controlled environment for such a demonstration, Zikra noted. One where both sides would be compelled to observe objectively. Wallace's communication device signaled an incoming transmission. Admiral Hall reports the TAC vessels have detected her ships and are demanding she withdraw from the sector. She needs our decision now. Gerald looked around at the assembled council members, then at the tactical display showing the converging military forces. An idea began forming, dangerous but potentially transformative. What if, he proposed, instead of hiding or evacuating, we invite them both in? Invite hostile military forces into our sanctuary? Wallace asked incredulously. Not the entire forces, just representatives, Gerald clarified. Admiral Hall clearly has some interest in our work. If we could arrange for representatives from both sides to witness Crick's capabilities firsthand under controlled conditions. A demonstration, Vera realized. Not just of Crick's neural advancement, but of how TAC variants and humans can achieve more together than separately. It's risky, Marcus warned. If the TAC representatives reject the evidence, they could report our exact location and capabilities to their command. True, Gerald acknowledged, but our current options are limited to evacuation, essentially abandoning decades of work or fighting a battle we cannot win. This offers a third path. Wallace considered the proposal. Admiral Hall might agree to such an arrangement, but how do we convince the TAC enforcement vessels to participate rather than attack? Lockthei stepped forward. I can help with that. Enforcement vessel protocols require scientific verification before executing purity judgments. If I transmit evidence of advanced neural development in standardized research format, protocol would demand investigation before destruction. Essentially, appealing to their bureaucracy, Wallace summarized. Precisely, Lockthei confirmed. They cannot eliminate what they have not properly classified. It would violate their own procedures. As the council deliberated, Gerald found his thoughts returning to the schematic he discovered earlier, the one based on Monica's research. The integration system she designed had been intended to bridge gaps, not just between mechanical components and biological systems, but between different ways of processing information. "There's something else we should consider," Gerald said, interrupting the discussion. "The pendant Eliza wears it contains Monica's original prototype for the neural interface system." All eyes turned to Eliza, who instinctively touched the pendant hanging around her neck. Monica designed it to facilitate direct neural communication between different processing architectures, Gerald explained. "If we could adapt it to connect human neural patterns with tac-tac variants like crick, a direct demonstration of interspecies neural cooperation," Zikra mused. "Theoretically possible but incredibly complex. The risk of neural damage would be significant." "I'll do it," Eliza volunteered without hesitation. "I've been studying Monica's work for years." The pendant was calibrated to my neural patterns specifically. Wallace looked from the tactical display to the determined faces around him. "This plan has too many variables, too many points of potential failure." He paused. "But it might be our only viable option. Admiral Hall needs our response now. Do we proceed with the invitation strategy?" The council members exchanged glances. The station had been built on the principle that cooperation between species was not only possible but necessary for the future. Now that principle would be put to its ultimate test. "Send the invitations," Gerald said firmly. "Let's show them what's possible when fear is repimbued with understanding." Wallace nodded and opened the communication channel to Admiral Hall. Behind him, the tactical display continued tracking the approaching vessel's harbingers of either destruction or transformation. In the medical section, technicians began preparing the neural interface equipment, while Lochthei composed the scientific notification that would, hopefully, prevent immediate attack by the tac-tac enforcement vessels. Vera carefully examined Crick, confirming the infant's readiness for the unprecedented demonstration they were about to attempt. "This is either the beginning of a new era," Vera murmured to the infant, "or our final act of defiance against entrenched prejudice." Crick responded with a series of complex chirps that required no translation. In the face of approaching conflict, the station prepared to make its stand not with weapons, but with evidence of what cooperation between species could achieve.